Wait a minute. As I trudged along a country road to my demotion destination, suddenly a woman with long black hair called out to me. Seeing the woman dressed in a way that seemed out of place in the countryside, I was reminded of the past. For me, who had experienced the despair of life, it could be said to be a moment of solace. Subsequently, the words that came from the woman's mouth led to an astonishing development. My name is Curtis. I turned 35 this year. I have been married to Julia for 5 years, but lately, something has been off. She seems distant, as if she's keeping a gap between us. However, I have been maintaining our usual daily life, trying not to misinterpret Julia's feelings. But, the happy days had crumbled without a trace. One day, when I returned home after working late, the lights were out. It was around 10 p.m., and Julia would normally be awake, but perhaps she was asleep. Thinking so, I quietly opened the front door, careful not to wake Julia, and sat on the sofa in the living room. Normally, I would have dinner and then go to bed after a shower. But that day, I was so tired that I ended up falling asleep on the sofa. The next day was a day off, and I woke up when the sunlight started pouring in. I slept well, huh? Where did Julia go? Usually, Julia would wake me up, but it was already past noon, and she hadn't come. Feeling something was odd, I headed to the bedroom where we usually sleep together. However, Julia was not there, and a different scene unfolded. Wait, the makeup and accessories are gone. Julia's dresser was in the bedroom, but there was nothing on it. I hurriedly opened the closet, but only my clothes were hanging there. Could it be that Julia had left the house? With a sinking feeling, I headed back to the living room. There, a piece of paper that I hadn't noticed the day before caught my eye. When I picked up the paper and looked at it, it was labeled Petition for Divorce in the upper left corner. Julia's name was already written on the divorce papers, and they were properly signed. This means, she wants a divorce. Though I had faintly realized it from Julia's behavior, having it thrust in front of me made me freeze. I stared at the divorce paper for a while. Since then, I have called Julia and sent messages. But there's no reply at all. Why did she suddenly leave the divorce papers and go out? When did she start thinking about wanting a divorce? I was left clueless, just zoning out. For a while, I could only focus on work and try not to think about Julia. But feeling that nothing would change this way, for Julia's sake and mine, I finally signed the divorce paper. It was about a month after Julia had left that I signed the divorce paper. I immediately signed the papers and went to the office to submit them, then sent a message to Julia to inform her. The message was read, so she must have seen it, but ultimately, no reply came back. They say you don't realize what you've got until it's gone, and that really is true. After submitting the divorce papers, I was living like a zombie. Every day with dark circles under my eyes, I could only give vague answers to anyone who asked. One day, amid such a routine, I made a tremendously big mistake. I had made small errors before, but this time it seemed even my boss couldn't cover for me. As a result, I was demoted to a rural area. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. But honestly, you've been too much to handle lately. Get it together. I had built a relationship of trust over many years, but even that boss had given up on me. Abandoned by my wife and demoted at work, what else do I have left? Maybe at this point, I have nothing left to lose. After the demotion was announced, I went home and immediately started packing. It was then that I found something. What's this? A diary. While organizing the closet, I found a diary at the back. It was unfamiliar, so surely it must have been Julia's. I hesitated to throw it away as it might contain the reasons why Julia left. I couldn't help but read it. And what was written there was a shocking truth. The diary was filled with happy days with her lover. Julia had been leading a happy life with another man while I was not around. Being a housewife, she spent a lot of time at home. Surely she had been dating during my working hours. She occasionally said she was going on trips with friends and stayed out, but those were actually trips with her lover. I've been deceived all along. How pathetic I didn't notice until now. A mix of emptiness from being deceived by the one I loved and a sense of relief from knowing why Julia left swirled in my heart. After that, I spent a long time not leaving the house, living a reclusive life. It was only until I moved to the demotion destination, and it wouldn't heal my heart. Eventually, I started working at the new office still with an unhealed heart. It was in the countryside area near the sea, where fishing industry was very active. I love seafood, and I might have been delighted if it was before all this happened. But now, in the midst of tasting life's despair, honestly, I can't even tell the taste of food. Being demoted in such a situation really shows how unlucky I am. Even so, I greeted people at the new place and received a simple handover. The work was basically the same as before, so I should be able to manage. But what worried me most was socializing. I'm not very good at interacting with people. Before, Julia was with me, and somehow I managed. Julia was very social and fervently talked about the importance of communication at work, teaching me various ways to connect with everyone. Following her advice, I had built a trusting relationship with my boss. Thinking about this, tears started to fill my eyes again. I want to think about it as little as possible, but the time spent together was too long. It's impossible. While thinking that I can only forget gradually, I decided to immerse myself in work as much as possible. While working, I can forget various things. The worst part is after work ends. Coming home to an empty house, with no one to talk to. And after getting into bed, I think about unnecessary things, and really, nothing good comes from it. At first, I tried to force myself to sleep by covering myself with a blanket, but eventually feeling it was futile. I started going for walks at night. Here, with fewer people than in the city, the air feels particularly clear at night. There aren't many streetlights, so I can't go far, but the sea, glimpsing through the gaps in the trees, was very beautiful. Watching the swaying waves, I felt as though my heart was being cleansed in some way. Although I could sleep well on days I watched the sea, the feeling of despair in my life did not disappear. I spent my days avoiding unnecessary contact with people. Since the new place is rural, there are no convenience stores nearby, only a supermarket. Various groceries are lined up there, and the seafood and vegetables look very delicious. Since Julia left, I had lost my taste for food, but looking at the groceries on display made me want to cook. I casually filled my basket with groceries and headed to the checkout. I'm not sure if it was the time of day, but there were hardly any people in line. After waiting a bit, it was my turn. The cashier, a woman, scanned the barcodes methodically and efficiently bagged my groceries. When I handed over the money, she presented a receipt, so I reached out to take it. Then, my eyes met hers and I involuntarily looked away. As I hurried away from the register, the woman seemed like she wanted to say something. But I didn't have the energy to talk to anyone at the moment, so I quickly left the supermarket. Once home, I cooked a meal using the seafood and felt a slight sense of fulfillment. From then on, it became a routine to buy good groceries at the supermarket and secretly enjoy a drink in the evening. Then one day, as I was walking down a country road, a woman with long black hair approached me. "Wait a minute." Surprised by the sudden interruption as I enjoyed the cool breeze, I turned to look at her. She was dressed in a way that seemed out of place in the countryside. Seeing her, I was reminded of the past. Come to think of it, Julia also wore such outfits. Julia liked frilly clothes and often wore them on our dates. Sometimes she'd catch her skirt on the door or nearly trip over a stone in her heels. While reminiscing about the happy days I had spent with Julia, I was lost in sentimentality. For me, who was experiencing the despair of life, it could be said to be a moment of solace. Noticing my distant gaze, the woman spoke again. Do you remember me?" I'm sorry, I don't recall. You know, I'm always at the supermarket checkout. My name is Jessica." Hearing that, I tried to remember the usual scene at the supermarket. I remembered that the woman who always checked me out might have been wearing a name tag that said Jessica. I didn't recognize her at first because she usually wore a ponytail, but now her hair was down. But she indeed looked like the cashier. I remember now. "Jessica, right? What's up?" "Oh, no. I just saw a familiar face and wanted to say hello." Her somewhat awkward reply left me puzzled. I recalled she had seemed eager to say something before, but had I done something wrong? I mulled it over but couldn't pinpoint any specific incident. It's a small place, so it's not rare to run into someone on the street. That's true. It's really hot today. If you like, would you care to go to a cafe? Taken aback by her sudden invitation, I was surprised. There was an old cafe down the road, but I hadn't expected to be asked to go there. Honestly, I was hesitant to accept. But something felt wrong about refusing. With that thought, I decided to take up Jessica's offer. We walked in silence to the cafe and ordered our drinks. Though I had agreed to come, I wondered why Jessica had invited me to the cafe. Despite the lingering questions, I decided to enjoy the moment. With that thought, I sipped my freshly served iced coffee. Jessica ordered an iced latte and sat staring at the table, holding her straw. I apologize for the late introduction. My name is Curtis. Why did you invite me to this cafe? To tell the truth, I've felt like we've met before, Jessica said, though I had only met her at the supermarket checkout. Actually, my recent memory is vague and I don't remember much. Due to the shock of being betrayed by Julia in the past, I unconsciously started to block out my memories. I'm sorry. I don't remember. I thought so. But I believe you once helped me. Helped you? I recalled that when I was just starting out as a working adult, I had helped a student. She had been injured, her pulse was faint, and she was barely breathing. It seemed she had been hit head-on by a car, and the panicking driver hadn't even called an ambulance. I quickly dialed 911 and administered first aid. It was a rough attempt, but it seemed to have worked. I was on my way to work that day but couldn't stop worrying about the student, so I decided to follow the ambulance. It took a while to reach the hospital on foot, but by the time I got there, she seemed to have regained consciousness. She kept thanking me profusely, although she had a head injury and struggled to speak clearly. She wanted to thank me, but I declined any thanks and went on to work once I knew she was safe. I remember being scolded by my boss for being late without calling in. Could she be that student? That can't be true. Despite thinking this, I decided to ask Jessica. Have you ever been taken to the hospital after a collision with a car? Yes. You do remember. I was the one you helped then. I can't believe it. To meet again like this. I've always wanted to thank you, Jessica said with sincere eyes. Apparently, since then, she tried to ask the nurses and the emergency team for my contact information. However, since I hadn't given my contact information to anyone, she was unable to reach me. She had hoped maybe she would see me again at the place where she collapsed, but despite waiting, I never appeared. And time just passed by uselessly. Later, due to a job situation, she moved to the countryside and thought she might never see me again. I thought I might never get to thank you. Thank you so much for helping me at that time. Helping each other is what we do. Are you living happily now? Yes, at first I thought, a job in the countryside? But now that I'm here, it's wonderful. I like it here more than in the city. Jessica said this with an untroubled smile. Indeed, I felt that living here was more enriching than in the city. In the city, even if someone is in trouble, few people stop to help. It's always, someone else will help, it's none of my business. That's the attitude you end up with. In fact, during my time in the city, I witnessed countless such instances and sometimes I ignored them myself. But since coming here, everyone seems to care about me. Even though I hardly talk at work, people nearby greet me every day. They ask if I'm sleeping well, if I'm eating nutritious meals. It felt nosy at first, but they're just concerned about me. Thinking about it, I might be blessed with the people around me. After Julia left, I thought I was abandoned by everyone. But here was Jessica, remembering me, searching for me. Talking to Jessica brought up feelings I had been suppressing. Before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face. Jessica, although puzzled, handed me a handkerchief and silently looked out the window. As I calmed down, I began to tell her everything that had happened. Suddenly, my wife Julia became distant and left home. And then, I shared how the stress from both mind and body led to repeated mistakes, resulting in my reassignment to this rural branch. I also talked about finding Julia's diary filled with accounts of her affairs while I was preparing to move due to my demotion. Jessica listened silently, nodding occasionally and furrowing her brows at times. She paid serious attention until I finished my story. People say life is full of ups and downs, but when one misfortune follows another, it really gets to you. Sometimes I wish I could just disappear. Everyone feels that way at least once. But I'm glad I met you, Curtis. I'm really glad I met you too, Jessica. After so much misfortune, only happiness lies ahead, right? As we talked about each other's current lives, future plans, and worries, the sun began to set outside the window. Since Jessica approached me in the early afternoon, we had been talking for about 6 hours. This might have been the first time I had spoken to someone this long. Julia and I shared common interests and never tired of talking, but we had never spent hours chatting like this. As I walked home feeling a strange sense of peace, I thanked Jessica. I really wondered why I could feel so calm. But I don't really understand what this emotion is. That night, I went to bed early and woke up feeling fresher than usual. Good morning. I greeted everyone at work cheerily, surprising my colleagues. Wow. Curtis is greeting us energetically. Did something good happen? Actually, I just want to apologize for the gloomy vibe I've been giving off lately. Don't worry about it. We all have our days. Even I look grim the day after my wife scolds me. My direct supervisor said with a smile, trying to put me at ease. The next day, seeing him just as he described, without any spirit, made me secretly chuckle. Even those who usually greet others with a smile can have bad days. This thought made me feel like I could keep pushing forward. From then on, I engaged with my work more than ever. Jessica and I exchanged contact information, and we met a few times at the cafe since then. Somehow, I found myself wanting to meet her again, feeling as if my soul was being cleansed each time. However, today, Jessica seemed different. Usually, she gives me an untroubled smile and interacts with me cheerfully, but today, she seemed to be forcing a smile the whole time and didn't make much eye contact. Jessica, is something wrong? Please tell me if something happened. Actually, my parents have passed away. I went to the funeral recently, but I still can't really grasp it or accept it. It turned out that both of Jessica's parents had died. She didn't go into details, and I didn't pry, but I could imagine. Jessica always loved her parents deeply and stayed in frequent contact with them even after becoming an adult. Surely, they were a major source of her happiness. Since then, Jessica seemed continuously downcast, and the vibrant smiles that were so characteristic of her became rare. She still kept in touch and came to the cafe with me. But I couldn't help but worry about this changed Jessica. Let's try to distract ourselves a bit today. A distraction? I said this and then took her hand, leading her toward the sea. The sea was just a short walk away, but there was a spot I had discovered. It had a sandy beach and felt liberating, yet I'd rarely seen anyone else there. I had no idea there was a place like this. Actually, when I was feeling troubled, I walked around this area a lot. Then I found this place. When things get tough, I come here to watch the sea. We sat down on the sand side by side. For about an hour, we silently watched the waves roll in and out. The sea really makes you feel at peace, doesn't it? I used to be scared of it, but now. You were scared of the sea? Yeah, I almost drowned when I was little. Since then, I've tried to keep my distance from the sea. The first thing I thought after hearing Jessica's story was how surprising it was. It seemed like she wasn't afraid of anything, given how she usually is. But perhaps, that was just her trying hard to conceal her vulnerabilities. Through my interactions with various people in life, it seems everyone does this to some extent. While hiding their flaws well, they try hard to act as normal as possible. Yet, if there is any unraveling, everything could collapse, and it's natural for things that were once commonplace to disappear. What's real and what should we believe? Everyone lives through trial and error. As Jessica gazed at the sea with a thoughtful expression, I was contemplating these things. Maybe we could go a little closer? Jessica nodded slightly to my words. We took off our shoes and socks, and slowly walked toward the waves. Make sure you hold my hand tightly. Of course. Don't worry, I'm here. As the waves approached our feet, Jessica's grip tightened significantly. The moment the water touched her feet, she shut her eyes tightly. Then, cautiously opening them and seeing she was okay, she smiled at me. It's not scary at all. It might be because it's just shallow water. On a hot day, cooling your feet like this is the best. Jessica seems to be enjoying the sound of the water as she paces. But perhaps she is not yet accustomed to it, as she keeps holding my hand and won't let go. Watching her innocently make splashes, I felt a heartwarming smile form on my face without realizing it. What are you laughing at? Noticing my laughter, Jessica puffed her cheeks and muttered. Sorry. I just couldn't help it. You look cute. Cute? Don't expect anything in return for complimenting me. With that, Jessica walked back to where we left our shoes. On the way back, our faces were bathed in the reddish glow of the setting sun. But I was aware that my face was flushing red. So, I was really glad it was during sunset. Once home, I decided to sort out my feelings. And that's when I realized that what I felt for Jessica was romantic. This is not good. How should I face her now? Surely, Jessica sees me just as a friend. To me, she has become indispensable in my life, not just as someone to talk to but as someone crucial. So, if she were to drift away because she learned of my feelings, I'd regret it tremendously. Thus, I decided to suppress my romantic feelings. It was a fine resolution, but each time I saw her, my feelings only grew stronger. I thought that if we didn't meet for a while, perhaps these feelings would settle. With that thought, I started to decrease our meetings and reduce our communication. Curtis, have you been avoiding me lately? On a day we met at the cafe after 2 months, Jessica suddenly asked that. Unsure of what to say, I fell silent. If I did something wrong, I'm sorry. And if you've come to dislike me, let's make today the last time we meet. That's not it. You're misunderstanding. I haven't come to dislike you at all. Then why don't you reply to my messages, and why do you refuse to meet? Seeing the sadness in Jessica's face made me feel guilty. Unable to keep hiding my feelings any longer, I decided to be honest about them. I've actually fallen for you, but I don't want to ruin our current relationship, so I've been trying to keep my distance. What, you like me? There's also the age difference. I didn't want to scare you. Jessica is 5 years younger than me, and if she knew about my romantic feelings, it would definitely shock her. That's what I thought. I thought you hated me. But now that I realize it was a misunderstanding, I feel relieved. I'm sorry. Can we continue to be friends as before? I don't want to. Hearing Jessica say she didn't want to made me despair. Exactly the scenario I feared had occurred. As I was feeling down, Jessica hurriedly added, "No, that's not it. I mean, not just as friends, but I'd like to be in a relationship." A relationship? Does that mean, Jessica, that you? To my question, Jessica nodded her head. I had never imagined that Jessica would feel the same way about me. At the same time, I felt so happy that I no longer had to hide my feelings. From then on, we began dating as a couple. Although it's a rural area with not many places for a proper date, it was still fine for me. Because with Jessica, everything shines brightly. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and we even started talking about moving in together. When should we start living together? I need to decide soon because my lease is up. How about in 2 months? That sounds good, but we need to start looking for a place soon or it won't work out. We hurriedly looked for a place and managed to start living together 2 months later. Since we moved just a week ago, the house is still cluttered with boxes, and there are things we still need. We haven't quite settled yet. Still, spending time with the one I love makes me realize just how happy it can be. What are you doing over there? Jessica found me lost in thought on the balcony of our new home. Just reflecting on everything that's happened so far. About your ex-wife? Yeah. But lately, I can hardly remember her. It's all thanks to you, Jessica. As we were having this conversation, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Who could that be at this hour? It was already around 10 p.m., so it couldn't be from work. And hardly anyone calls me. The caller ID was blocked, so I couldn't tell who it was. I thought I shouldn't answer, but I accidentally pressed the respond button. Hello? Since I had already picked up, I decided to talk to the caller. However, when I realized who it was, I couldn't hide my surprise. Hello, is that you, Curtis? I wanted to see you, so I called. That voice. Is that Julia? It's been a while. I went back to the old house and found out you had moved, and when I went to your company, they said you had transferred. Apparently, Julia went back to the house where we used to live, realized I wasn't there, and went to my office. However, since I had already been transferred, she didn't know where I was and decided to call me. I've been reflecting a lot. I was terrible to you, Curtis. And now, I want to reconcile. Can we meet? I was shocked by the sudden call after years, wondering what this person was trying to say. Had it been right after we broke up, perhaps I would have been happy. But now, living with the love of my life, Jessica, I was finally about to grasp true happiness. I couldn't allow anyone to destroy that. Also, I knew why Julia had suddenly called me. A mutual friend told me. "You broke up with your affair partner, right?" "That's right." I realized I was wrong, and that's why. How insincere. "I heard you were dumped and even sued for damages by his wife." "How do you even know all that?" In fact, a mutual friend had called me a little while ago and filled me in on Julia's current situation. Julia was being sued for damages by the wife of the man she was involved with and was struggling to figure out how to pay it back. It seemed like she wanted to reconcile with me. Because I had always been generous, she wanted me to somehow come up with the money for the damages. She had left on her own accord, and now suddenly calling me, she really only thinks of herself. As I was speechless with dismay, Jessica, sensing the situation, spoke to me. "What's wrong? Did something happen? My ex-wife just called. Let me talk to her." Put it on speaker. Following Jessica's determined gaze, I switched to speaker mode. "Are you his ex-wife?" "I'm Jessica, and I'm dating Curtis." "What? Dating? What do you mean? Curtis is truly a wonderful person. Thank you for letting him go." "Hey, are you picking a fight?" Hearing Jessica's words, Julia began to simmer with anger. But Jessica didn't seem done yet. "Please don't bother Curtis anymore. I will make him happy." "How dare you be so arrogant?" Julia still seemed to have something to say, but I ended the call before she could continue. "It probably wouldn't have been anything important anyway. I'm sorry for making you feel uncomfortable." "No, not at all. I feel relieved having said what I wanted to say." I had thought Jessica was not one to get angry, but she was definitely furious earlier. That night, we opened a bottle of special wine we had been saving and drank it together. After that incident, I changed my phone number, so there was no more contact from Julia. In fact, when I'm with Jessica, I forget all about Julia. Today, when we submitted our marriage registration, I remembered Julia for a moment, but Jessica's smile quickly erased any unpleasant memories.